Hello everyone, Dan Hendriksen here. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be doing a review of the new Titleist T300 irons, which are just about to come out onto the market. Now we have Ben Hiscock that's come over to help me out today, just to talk about some of the tech, make sure I'm fitted into it properly, make sure I'm talking about the right stuff. T300 for me has been a really good product. It's been probably my #1 selling product in the shop here at Torquay. It's produced such good numbers for so many different types of players, from players from low handicaps to high handicaps to complete beginners. It's a product that just works really well. It's a game improvement iron, but it's also an iron that I have considered even putting in the bag myself on some occasions. When I walk into the studio at Torquay, I'm not feeling too warm, I'll always pick that product up just to have a little go and warm up with it. It's a great looking iron, so I'm really interested to see what the new one has to offer us. Let's go and meet up with Ben in the range here at Torquay and see what this product is all about. Now, before we hit some shots with this new T300 model, I just want to give you an idea of what it kind of looks like to me when I look down on the golf ball. Now, previously I've fitted the old T300, which is this one right here, and I have to say that this model really has something I've enjoyed fitting. I've also enjoyed hitting it myself in the studio. When I walk into the studio down here at Torquay, it's not very often that you won't see me pick up the 7-iron from the T300 to hit it into the studio. Now, most of the time I'm doing that is because I'm I'm not warmed up. So I want a club to pick up to hit into the net just to warm up with. So having something like the T300 just sat there just wanting to pick it up is because it's so easy to hit. But also the looks down on the golf ball, it's very little offset. It blends in really quite nicely. It gives me a bit of confidence if I'm not probably swinging it quite as well. But it's something that I actually could have used as a set. I would have happily moved into a set of T300s to actually use myself, because the profile of them was just slimline, clean, really good looking head. So when I now look down at the new T300, I'm seeing a slightly different profile than what I was seeing in the old T300. First impressions are a little bit more offset as a look. That's not necessarily the actual case in this situation, so it might not be that it's a bit more offset actually from a measurement point of view, but just the look of it, it's a little bit shinier around the head. And when you get that sort of chrome look that's where with the old one is a little bit duller around the actual profile of the head, when it gets a bit shiny, sometimes the angles can start to stick out to you a little bit, I don't know, a little bit clearer. And certainly in this case I'm seeing that there's a little bit shinier in the chrome across the heel and in the toe, which is telling me or showing me from a visual point of view that it just looks that little bit more offset. So for someone like me, that's not necessarily what I'm kind of looking for. However, for the person that this is sort of, you know, targeted at, it's probably going to give them a lot of confidence. Maybe if you're someone that moves the ball from left to right, this offset might just help you keep that ball a little bit on the straight and narrow. The other thing is, when I look down at it, I look at the top line of the club, and again, when I look at the colouring where it's a little bit brighter, it just looks that little bit thicker than the previous model, which again for someone like me isn't anything that I want to look at, but for the golfer that this is targeted at, it probably will work really quite nicely and give the player lots of confidence looking down at the golf ball. So I've also got the pitching wedge and the 5-iron here from the T300 set. And for me, the pitching wedge is quite an important club, and it's one that I want you to consider as well when you're looking at purchasing a set of irons. For me, I like to have a pitching wedge that kind of blends into my wedges. And what you can find certainly with a game improvement iron like a T300 is that maybe they can start to get a little bit chunky down in the pitching wedge and maybe in the gap wedge. But certainly first impressions looking down at this particular wedge is it's definitely got that smaller profile. It's being mindful, or Titleist are being mindful, that they want you to blend this into probably a set of Vokeys. So having that little bit more rounded in the toe, giving it that sort of profile of more of a a specialist wedge is definitely a tick in the box for someone like me. And then finally the 5-iron, well, it just oozes confidence when I look down at this club. It's something that's big, it's got that help. Lots of players really do struggle when they move into sort of from 6-iron upwards. You're going to start to see players that really struggle in this department. Well, a club like this, you can just see the back edge on the actual club itself. It's not too intrusive, so it's not jumping out at me, but you can just kind of see it there. And again, for lots of players that struggle to get the ball in the air, I think this particular model is definitely going to give you that confidence that's going to help you get that ball up in the air for you.
Hi, so I'm Ben Fisher, Titleist Area Sales Manager for South Wales and the West, and we're here talking about T300 today.
So talking about T300, this has been a popular product, and I say that having been a retailer myself and selling these clubs, this one for me has performed year after year when it comes to sales and performs from the numbers point of view. What's this one going to do for us this year then, Ben?
I think we want to keep the momentum going with T300. From even AP1 before that, we're, as you rightly say, on an upward trajectory with this product. I guess the storyline here is it's the ultimate game improvement club. High launch, great forgiveness, and great distance. So they're the three main things we're looking for with T300.
So there was been some changes, let's say, from AP1 into T300, and I know it was a completely new range and a completely new launch, but there was obviously a lot of improvement going into that product, which I certainly saw. Are we seeing anything different again now moving into this particular range?
Yeah, so I think the design brief has always been very much the same with this product, so it's a case of how can we improve on it. So one thing that they've managed to do, our R&D team, is increase the amount of tungsten we use in the head by 40%. We talked about with T200 already about how that drives more forgiveness, but it also drives higher launch because of that lower CG within the head. We've also incorporated some driver design into this iron product, so we have a variable face thickness, which is really again going to drive a bit more ball speed throughout the face. Max Impact 2.0 is again there designed to support that face and give it great feel right the way across.
So you're talking about then off-centered strikes. So if some people don't necessarily hit it plumb out of the middle, should we say, they're still going to maintain good ball speed off the club face and still overall get their distance that they're looking for.
And it's not just about ball speed as one measure of performance. We need to marry it up with a load of different things here. So if we can create more ball speed but also high launch for that slower swing speed golfer, that's going to lead to more carry and overall more performance.
And the guys, just chatting with them earlier, they talked about that they were seeing maybe a little bit better launch out of these products and maybe a little bit more spin, because ultimately when you move into these more helping irons, we start to lose a bit of spin, don't we? So are we seeing that in this product again?
Yeah, and I think that's probably a byproduct of where we're positioning the centre of gravity, and using that 40% more tungsten in the head is going to deliver exactly that, Dan.
Tell me then, where are we with these numbers?
Well, it's really interesting because listening to everything that you were saying of purely aesthetics, kind of setting the tone for the shot before we even hit any balls, you actually were kind of saying, you know what, I prefer last season's. So really, with that in mind, like me just stood here away from Trackman for a moment, that your ball flight is kind of even using my eyes as the top tracer. They're all very similar, and then looking at numbers that sometimes can get overlooked with the consistency of the plus or minus numbers on Trackman, or you probably have similar stuff on your quad where you've delivered impact in a more similar way, whether that's because you feel a little bit more comfortable with that level of offset, that blade length, even that just general profile, which is often going to lead to some pretty good numbers, isn't it? I know that you currently play MB, so it couldn't really be much more different from an aesthetic profile, bounce, offset. The whole thing is going to be a completely different club. So going into something like our new iron, which is so confidence inspiring and perhaps maybe does look a little bit bigger than last season's product, it's going to produce some slightly different results, isn't it?
So I don't think Titleist necessarily for this year, or with this model coming out, I don't necessarily think that what they're producing is any better. And what I mean by that is, do they need to produce anything better? because the quality of the T300 originally, in my view, was a really good looking iron. It was actually, if I was going to play either a T300 or a T200 iron, I was going to play the T3 over the T2, purely because aesthetically I preferred the look of the T300. Now, I'm not sure whether the T300 was designed for a player like me, whereas this year's model, I'm seeing a bigger profile. I'm seeing something that's going to maybe give people a little bit more confidence, that really pushes me back to now the T200 range, which if I look at the new T200, I'm inspired by it. I think it's a beautiful looking iron. I think it looks even better than the old T300. But now you've got a really good progression from T100 to T200 to T300, really getting into 3 different categories of golfer. Yes, there's going to be a blend of 2, but there shouldn't be, in my view, a player that could play an MB or could play a T300. There should be that sort of blend, that they stop at kind of like maybe the T200, but then the player that could play T300 could actually play in the T200 as well, but wouldn't necessarily move into the T100 or MB.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point, because ultimately it is what the golf ball's doing, really, which is why we do so many, from a custom perspective, we do almost 70% of our business is custom and split sets. So sorry, it's more 70% of our business is like actually split sets. And what you see the guys on tour, you might see a player that plays MB at the bottom but actually has a T200 4 iron or something like that. You can see, and you've got to watch closely when you're watching the events on tour, and you will see a few different iron models in people's bags where that could be something that you might put in play going forward. But completely hear what you say, that when you look at the new models, I've done a lot of split sets with our TTSAs over the last couple of weeks, where T100S and T200, they synchronize and blend so well now for loft from kind of 6 iron up, that it is such a kind of progression of, you know what, I love the kind of taperedness of the soles and the bounce and the cozy shots you can hit into and around the greens with the bottom clubs, but I want a bit more ball speed off my 4 or my 5 iron going into a long par 3 or 4. So that's where, like you were saying, you know, in previous gen, that T300, you, with those profiles, you might well have gamed the whole bag, but actually now, slightly different story.
So the last thing I want to talk about when it comes to irons and the T300 is the shop appeal. So what does it look like when you go into the shop and you have a little look at this club? Is it something that's going to jump out to you and say, pick me up, I want you to test me? Well, if I take the old T300, the visuals of this was, there was a kind of a little bit of a joke going on at one stage, certainly amongst some of the pros that I talked about, and that was the Starship Enterprise going on here. And to me, even though it was a decent look on the actual club, and sort of there was a storyline around what Titleist were doing with it, is it kind of looked like it was a bit kind of welded onto the back. It was almost like what you'd expect to see from maybe a prototype iron. Well, if we move into now the new product, the new T300, I can definitely say that we've got a cleaner look on the back now. We're starting to see that sort of MI part on the top here is blended more into the actual back of the club, which I have to say is a much better look when you put it up on the shelf. So I think Titleist have made a real shift, and the reason why I say that is because they've had to make way for the new T200. Now, the T200 in the previous model, for me, looked a little bit too offset. I didn't really like the sound of it off the face. The actual blade length looked quite long, and that's why I was more of a fan of the T300 product over the T200. So if I was going to put a set of those golf clubs in the bag, it would be the T300 over the T200, which to me doesn't make any sense. as a player working their way through the catalogue, should we say, of Titleist products, starting at MB, moving to CB, T100, T200, T300, and then the T400, I'd like to see that it kind of moved like this. So if I was going to pick a set of irons along there, I'd work my way across this way. I wouldn't want to necessarily jump into a completely different category. And I think this year, you know, you can say the numbers that I got from probably the T300 of the old model was maybe, from a dispersion point of view, a little bit better, but I preferred the look of it. So confidence wise, I liked that club. I wasn't necessarily a big fan of the look, but this club is not designed for someone like me. It's designed for people that are going to want a little bit of confidence. I think the old model was starting to look too slimline. It was trying to focus on the better player to see if they could entice them to play in that. And you've got to think about players like Phil Price. Phil Price is using, and has used in the past, the T300 model. And you know, I'm not sure whether that was kind of designed for him in mind. The T200 now probably suits that eye a little bit better. So I think what they've done with the new model this year is they've made it just that little bit bigger in the profile look. They've given it something that's going to hit it up in the air just that little bit more with that extra tungsten down in the bottom. They've given it a lot more forgiveness across the face. So where I was miss-hitting shots, I was still getting the ball speed that I wanted to get from that club. So all in all, this club is going to work for the category that it's marketed towards. But I'd like to hear what you think about this. Put your comments down below. What do you think of the new T300 model? Is it something that you would like to go out and test yourself? Don't forget to put your comments down there. If you are new to the channel and you like what you're seeing, hit that subscribe button. And as always, stay safe, and we'll catch up with you again very soon.